rather than even the make-believe appearance of there being some structure or form to tonight, let us consider that we're going to have an evening of oleo, or the night of the living potpourri, or I don't know. It would seem at times, if there is no structure to some of my 90-minute commentaries, that in that case I've got enough odds and ends to start how many new religions? How many? Yeah. I consider that to be a safe number. Odds and ends. No connection to one another, so don't even look for them. Number one is a quite ancient idea put into verbal form all the way back, if I recall, to Grecian times in the West. The idea being expressed thusly, that men are gods in ruin. Now I ask you this: what possible purpose could be being served for a life to make men think, to make men feel, in some way themselves to be cut-rate versions of their own imagined gods? What possible purpose? Just because I stretch my memory fingers and say it goes back as far as the Greeks, it's been expressed many, many times, and somebody could rephrase it today. Kyroots could rephrase it. Almost anybody in ordinary life could be driven to rephrase that, and it would still apparently be a currency that had some value, that people would go, yeah, and you could wax philosophically, if you weren't going to be skiing later that day, at great length on the basis, men are but gods in ruin. It continues to sound as though it has deep validity, forever validity, infinite validity, no end to the possible philosophical ramifications. So what is life up to? This is not an ancient holdover artifact, nor is it some New Age idea, is what I'm insinuating, that it goes on continually and has a resounding validity to it. But for what possible purpose has life placed this in man? That he in some way is but a cut-rate version of his own imagined gods. See if you can carry it a little further. What might this suggest, getting even further into the possible purposes life would make use of this idea implanted in man? Is what might this suggest regarding men's notions of their finally perfected self? That if we are, as we are, man is but gods in ruin, then what does that suggest if man were able to complete this imagined perfection through whatever means, whatever religion, whatever system? What would that say? That is, if I must, that is, what kind of chemical gods does man have that would be producing just shoddy knockoffs of themselves, and then on top of that make men believe that they should desire to be just like them? I did not think at first, if I thought at all, that it was going to be verbally complex. But remember, all verbal complexities have a chemical and neurological base to it, that this may appear to go in a whole lot of different places, but it is not really that complex if you just take it at the surface. That is, it's not so complex that you can't go anywhere with it. Why is it that it sounds agreeable? Sounds as though it may have quite a valid basis for men to believe that they are gods themselves in a ruined condition. Gods in ruins. Why might this be? What could be being served? And what does this also say? Where can you go with this if you try and picture what would be a man's state, an ordinary man's state of completion of his imagined perfection through some religion, through some miracle, through some mystical quest, that if all he's going to be is no longer a god in ruin, but an actual god. But the gods being such that they initially, if gods in ruins had original validity, that they initially made him just a shoddy knockoff, a poor imitation of themselves to start with. That if you reached the end of some would-be mystical quest and you became as the gods, what in the hell would you be? Would you be no more than a kind of god that would produce creatures that were mere cheap import versions of themselves? What kind of apparent circle would have been completed? Well, you people are not trying to tell me that tonight is not the night kind of night for our odds and ends. Because thus far you've proven that at least you're odd enough. Very well, let's just change the subject. One of the most unsettling, near even terrifying ideas is, in its full ramifications, don't leave it at just some biological notion, but is the idea of survival of the fittest. And whether you've ever hidden in a closet and been terrified by this, it doesn't matter. That has no relationship to what I'm telling you. It is very unsettling whether you have apparently pondered it at length or not. It is upsetting whether it has apparently been so verbally, yellow circuit-wise to you. It is a ripple causer on the chemical level throughout the race of man. The life has put it out there for a reason. And it is unsettling, even approaching terrifying at times, for what I shall describe as two reasons. First one being that men cannot think of and accept what they think of a stable definition of what fittest would be. That looked on at the 3D level, the fittest would be open to many, many, many interpretations. If we just did it at a crude and immediate level and divided up into the red circuit dominated people and the blue circuits and the yellow circuit centered people. Red circuit people, that area of life's own time extended body, would have one specific notion of what fittest would mean. Obviously, if we isolate it in that artificial manner, those people, the fittest would simply be the strongest, the healthiest. Those are the most endurance. But then those that apparently have activities that are centered around the activities of the blue circuits would have another general notion of what fittest meant, and so with the yellow circuit people. And then even to a finer degree, when you got into smaller groups, when you got into apparently even the individual level of what would you, at your ordinary level, consider to be the fittest inside the term survival of the fittest. At the individual level, the immediate chemical answer is the feeling of what it would take to complete you, to turn you from a ruined God into a completed God. to take you from the level of a Marshall's into Bloomingdale's itself. That I am now no longer a second, I'm not slightly blemished, I'm the real thing. That is the first unsettling aspect that no one can properly define, ordinary people, if they were told directly. That this is an absolutely serious, valid, religious, spiritual truth that human life is based on survival of the fittest. And the fittest means, and then the blank is, that each individual imagines what it would take, just my imagination, just what I'm wired up to believe would be the overcoming of my flaws, the correction of all of my mistakes. That would be the fittest. And on that basis, within reason, within verbal reason, within verbally 3D reason, we could say that there would be as many ideas of the fittest as there would be people. On a greater level, that's not true, but at the ordinary level, you can say that. So then you would have every person on this planet at any given time being their own walking, living example of what the fittest would be. No, not an example. What they imagine would be their perfected self. That's it. There would be no common agreement. Now, if there's anything that is frightening, in case you've never mentioned it, in case you've never thought about it, what is another example of real fright? And for those of you who don't know, I'll tell you, it is to be in the midst of a mob where apparently no one still has any grip, in the ordinary sense, on three-dimensional reason or reality. And there seems to be not even the possibility of you coming up, should you to try and lead it, to come up with a consensus of what we should do now to combat this raging insanity. It's as though you turn around and this mob, each and every person is their own individual wildfire. That each person is out of control in their own unique way. And there is no way to suddenly say, hey, stop, hold it. We've all got to pull ourselves together and come to our senses. Assume that would work on one person. But that's all. The rest of them, you'd have to find some other way to say it. That is the fear of there being no common definition of the fittest. Not theoretically, I'm suggesting to you, but a real chemical basis that each person feels as though, in this sense, that I am floating out in a sea of absolute ambiguity and argument, if it comes to it, over what is the fittest. I can try and describe it, but if they were hearing what I'm attempting to detail to you verbally, they would be left with the fact that what I'm going to describe would be me in overdrive. What I'm trying to describe now would be me as a Jew with a capital J, me as a Christian with a capital C, me as a Mason with a capital M, me as a Dixon with a... But I would be alone. It is not a universal definition of the fittest. And so if I hold up my hand and say, all right, I know what the fittest is, if the rest of them know anything, if they heard the same kind of description you just gave and they heard what I heard, and I say, yeah, I got a definition, everybody that hears me give my definition will attack me. Because my definition is truly singular, just as theirs would be. But hell, I'm not going to hold my hand up. I'm not going to have to answer first because everybody hears it. Perforce is going to disagree with it. There is no common definition of what completion, of what perfection, of what truly religious, of what truly anything that seemed to have to do with one's shortcomings, one's shortfalls, one's flaws, one's mistakes, anything that would keep you from being the epitome of the fittest. There is no common agreement. And those of you taking notes on the edge of your paper, you might also take some passing note of why there's no answer to anything. Why you cannot, if you're one of the real would-be revolutionary few, actually go up to somebody, the Pope or Guru X or Yogi Bear, and say, look, I don't know right now, what would it take to make me a first-class person? What would it take to make me enlightened? What would it take to make me an awakened person, a completed person? The only answer that is forthcoming is an answer that is not correct. Because what you're asking is, what would it take to make me, all right, either one of the fittest, or since your only interest should be in you, if you got any sense. What would it take to make me the fittest in my own state? In the land and wonderful land of me, what would it take to make me the fittest? How can I survive amongst all the people, the hoi polloi? How can I ensure that I become the fittest? How can I make myself cream and rise to the where? And if you met anyone who had the answer, then he couldn't tell you the answer, because there is no way for you to become the fittest. If anybody else tells you it's not your way to become the fittest. And if, at any ordinary level, which is including all priests, popes, rabbis, and yogis, and etc., if anybody looks at you and says, aha, you've done it, you haven't. If they say, I can see what you've done, and you have reached your own state of perfection. Mathematically, this could not be true, if you're following me on this. But if they said that, and if it were true, then it was not correct. Because then, that person and you both are the fittest. That is, what seems to be your example, your living example, your definition of what the fittest is also his or hers. And you can't have two. Well, unless there's some form that I never really thought about of Siamese twins ignorance. I guess that could be. You both might be joined at the dumb. It might be some sort of currishness built for two. The second part that I suggest you is unsettling, even at a non-verbal chemical level, of survival of the fittest, is then that people chemically feel, or for those of you still at that stage, all right, they know that the determination of the fittest is not, I repeat, is not under their control. Which, of course, if you understand that, renders all the time I just spent describing the first aspect as, I guess, moot squared. It is terrifying, even non-verbally, to be confronted if you are not prepared. If you could make someone confront the second aspect I'm describing of survival of the fittest, that under all ordinary conditions, no one has any control over who seems to be the fittest. They apparently have no power in helping produce in themselves any degree of fitness. It just seems to be. Now, anyone who doesn't find that frightening is not paying attention. Well, there is, of course, one more possibility, that you are so far from any definition of the fittest that it doesn't matter whether you hear it or not. It's sort of like announcing that tomorrow is the last day to put in your applications for a Fulbright scholarship, and if that information doesn't happen to get to the frogs down the street in that pond, you know, nothing really is lost. That is what I'm suggesting to you, that if you don't hear this and it doesn't frighten you, you may be frogs that miss the last day of applying for a Fulbright. In other words, no harm done. Paragraph 3. Let's keep moving and get off these things since they're either too odd or too endly. A little more about 4D time sight. 4D time sight, remember that term's all hyphenated, that's one word really. 4D time sight would reveal, amongst other things, the following. It would reveal that everything is stable and orderly, and it would reveal that everything is unpredictable and chaotic. 4D time sight would reveal that everything is creative and proper, and it would also reveal that everything is destructive and disreputable. But 4D time sight would also reveal that everything is no. Put ... And you complete that part at your leisure. Along these lines, let me point out that the real revolutionist would not in any sense be a mere intellectual. I haven't changed the subject. For a strictly, if there was such yellow circuit approach to such questions as how is everything? And what condition is everything? Is it stable and orderly? Is it chaotic, unpredictable? A mere intellectual would see it all on the basis of whatever you're questioning, whatever you're proposing as possibilities, they must either be true or false. And they must either be true or false because real 4D time sight, revolutionary sight, would be the ability to see that is beyond the grip of because. The only way that because has any effect is if you are time blind. If time is not a part of your consciousness, of your awareness of whatever you're apparently pondering, considering, thinking about, studying about, trying to figure out, trying to find your way through, then there is always an answer to such a logical scenarios, as I started, of saying that real 4D time sight would show that everything is stable and orderly, and it shows that everything is chaotic and unpredictable. Now, I listen to what I say, and I know that that's not possible. I know that makes no sense. I know that. But why? At the ordinary level, why is it impossible? Why could things not be orderly and stable, and coevally be chaotic and unpredictable? Well, the general answer amongst all philosophers is, well, because. But I can do a little bit better than that. I can do my intellectual imitation, or my imitation of an intellectual. And I can be a little more specific and point out that it cannot be both, not only because, but it can't be both because things are either true or false. Things are either correct or incorrect. And you cannot say that things are orderly and chaotic. That cannot be true because it cannot be both ways. Things cannot be stable and unpredictable because both things cannot exist at once. It would be false to say that. Now, do you see, even for a moment, the great four-dimensional torted logic of all this, of what it does at the 3D level, is this absolutely, from a 4D level, insane, impossible, eternal, demonic dance of the binaries makes things appear to be stable. That is, all right, don't fuck around with my mind, Charlie. Things are either stable or they're chaotic. Now, I don't have a real grasp right now on which they are, so you tell me. I paid you to tell me, you're the expert, and the guy says, right, they're so-and-so. And even if you later question it, if right then you go, well, thank God that's a load off my mind. That somebody, apparently, that life is put in a place of authority says, I'm telling you, things are chaotic. Look around you. Maybe he says a few more things. It's not just the words. If you're in the right place, back in the city, and you're in front of the ruling powers, one of the institutions of the ruling powers, and someone tells you, all right, things are chaotic. Or, on the contrary, they say things are stable. Don't worry about it. That gives the passing feeling of stability. When the quirk is, once you develop any time sight, is that's the very kind of thing that is completely against expanded vision. That is what should be, that man has always called real logic, real reason, real thinking. That the very, from a 4D view, the very epitome of an example of that which is illogical, that is, that things have got to be either true or false, produces the passing sensation at the 3D level of consciousness that things are stable. Almost all of you have had, or should have had, or you should be able to conjure it up in your DNA radio file somewhere, WDNA, that in the nervous system, what appears to be people's ordinary mind and consciousness, one of the most fearful episodes that people have when ordinary people wonder if they're losing their mind, losing their grip, that they're going to come to pieces, is not just in an area that apparently they have developed some idée fixe, that they have become absolutely uncontrollably enamored with some idea. I suggest to you the most terrifying thing at the ordinary level is that they're not sure what they feel or what they think. That I am tossed upon a sea of indecision. That I would not be as worried about going crazy if right now I really felt, well, hey, you've finally done it. You flipped. You are nuts. But it's just sitting around wondering, am I nuts? To run and look in the mirror again and say, well, I could look all right. Maybe I'll go out to the store, the 7-Eleven, and ask for a loaf of bread and see if anybody goes. It's the not knowing. It's the not being able to tell, am I okay? Or am I so far gone that I think I'm okay? And probably if I walk outside, people are going to go, ooh, and start taking steps back. The fear. It is the assurance that things are still operating in a binary manner. It is the assurance that God is still on his throne of 0 or 1. That God is still on this throne, the gate is either open or closed. The current is either flowing or not. And you can call it any damn thing you want to. Things are either going uphill or downhill. Goodness is either in charge or evil is winning today's battle. The gods are winning or the anti-gods are winning. My good sides are prevailing or my lesser sides are going to triumph. It doesn't matter what it is. As long as there's a feeling, even if it's downhill, even if today the mountain's on me instead of me on the mountain, at least I know where I what? Stand. At least I know how I what? Feel. At least I know where I what? Look to. Even if it's wrong, even if it's discomforting, even if it's discombobulating, at least I know. It's the not knowing that seems to kill the spirit of the bourgeoisie. If you're going to be middle class, what's the most important thing to have? Not a BMW or brown shoes or a sweater tied around your neck. The most important thing is some sense of surety. I know where I live. I know what my position is. Being here in the middle class, I can see my inferiors and I can see my superiors. I know that to which I aspire, and I know that from which I have cometh, and I hope to avoid at all costs. "4D time sight, 4D time consciousness transcends," and of course in a way that I can't describe as long as I am using words, because I am stuck with the 3D words, but it transcends the full grip of the cause. And without the grip, without the basis of the cause, nothing can be true or false, right or wrong, up or down, good or evil. Without that, to say, or to insinuate, at least as some of you suspect I'm doing, that yes, you could see that things are, without any doubt, unpredictable and chaotic, and everything is stable and orderly. Without the cause, you can't question that. Without the cause, you cannot say that's not possible. Without the cause, you can't say that that's irrational. If you did not have a cause, you wouldn't even ask about it. Were it not for the cause, I would not describe it. Paragraph, whatever the hell it is. As long as we're here in this nice clear-cut courtyard and pristine, precise moonbeams of new information and mystical knowledge falling all about our heads and shoulders, I'll plow right on through and offer some additional revolutionary secrets. And now's a good time, as strange as this is going to sound to some of you, since you put up with 10 minutes of me trying to talk about what I just tried to talk about, whatever that was. Here's another one. It is a method that absolutely defies any direct description, but if you think that'll stop me, you might as well put your handkerchief in your nose. And it's this. It is a kind of method that no one has ever described. All right, life has let this kind of thing come out. I can't resist pointing this out. Such things as the I Ching. That there seems to be information in a kind of book or reservoir somewhere, and then it gets written down that you throw coins, or you throw sticks, or you read tea leaves, or you throw out the bones of your grandmother, and they form some kind of pattern. There's something happens apparently by chance, and then you look in this book, and then there's apparently information, and it almost meets Kyroots' description of it being revolutionary, because it apparently is radical enough that at first it gets your attention, and yet, coevally, it's really not frightening enough to upset the bankers and the children, that is, the bourgeoisie in you. And it is ambiguous enough that you can almost take anything out of it, but it seems to offer, if not an absolute window, a crack in the door somewhere, that there might be a new view come out of what I should do. Of pondering, should I change jobs? And you throw the sticks or throw the coins, and you look it up in the book, and it says, wet pigs do not tap dance. And it seems to offer, I don't know what it says in those books, but it seems to offer a chance of, wait a minute, now that may seem ridiculous and very radical, but now if I take that as a parable, that could mean, and you can go off, and hopefully, as they say in the 3D world, it might affords the possibility of some new neural connections. You might consider an aspect or possibility of changing jobs or not changing jobs in a certain way that you had not before you did this. All right. All forms of apparent soothsaying, fortune-telling, Zen notions of trying to break through whatever you might want to call it in the Western world, the established mind, the established patterns, and trying to come up with a new way of looking at something. What I was going to describe to you is, in a way, I said it was never been done, but all of that has been crude reflections going on in life. So let me see if I can drag you right down the water real quick to a chemical level. And there is a method that is, I can't describe it rationally now, so I warn you that in advance. But it's like you trying to find irrational connections. 3D-wise, as always, that itself is irrational. But remember, that is just 3 parts, at best, of a 4-part loop going into another dimension in another direction. It is somewhat of an approach, to steal from the legal lexicon, of a kind of executory condition or consideration, that it's like a contract that 2 parties agree will do so and so if and only when and if another event takes place. I'm still headed toward it. Don't give up yet. It'd be sort of like that. It would sort of be like trying to find unrelated contingencies. I'm still going in that direction. It'd be like trying to foresee into a present playing position instead of just kind of being there, of being sort of inert, latent energy as you grab it and you drag it into the apparent binary dance going on, into the apparent game on the field, that all games, of course, only have 2 teams, and you try and drag in a 3rd one. It would be on this kind of basis. I'll get even closer. Either that or it's going to sound even further fetched to you. What if you are faced with what appears to be to you, we're not questioning it, but it seems to you to be a real serious problem, and you cannot decide what to do? And as all serious problems are, there are 2 possible solutions. That's all you need. That in this particular situation, I should either, let's say I should either act and say yes to a certain thing, or I should say no. And you, pulling up all of your possible resources that you can find, cannot decide which seems to be the better course. There's no way to analyze it away. You cannot logically find what would seem to be the winning game plan for you. Assume other people are involved even. You seem to be in the position that if you could take a more clinical approach, you would find this to be the case in more times than you might now believe you remember, that you apparently have no real overpowering interest in saying yes or no, of doing either this or that. And you try to take into consideration the other people involved, and you might say, all right, this involves me and maybe another person, maybe 2 more people, maybe even more. And you can see, as far as you're concerned, that even in their case, that one person here might really prefer I say yes, but then again there'd be some over here that just as soon, if not as much, prefer I'd say no. That everything has its cost. Resources, not just money, but resources of all kind, energy, interest, people's time, that everything has a cost. And I find, looking at it every way possible, trying to feel every way that I can about this, I seem to have no particular interest, and yet a decision must be made. And let us assume that you, through my great and evil influence, at least are past the point of chanting and praying or throwing the damn sticks on the ground. I shouldn't have said that. Some of you, if you fall back to your ordinary state, I guess you're just as well off, to say the least. It's to throw the sticks. Take that as a very questionable aside. Back to where we were. The method, I'm still going toward it, would be as though you come up with an executory clause, consideration in the way in which you're looking at the problem. Now you got to listen, because what I'm going to tell you verbally is not it. But this is as close as I am going to try to point. If I try to point in more specifically, it would have, as oftentimes the case, the propensity of making you look even further away. But here it is, that you apparently look at some other situation in which you are involved that may apparently have no relationship whatsoever. Now remember, this is not a good example, but this is the only example that I'm going to give you. This is about as close. And you decide, all right, if this, remember we got one problem here that you're trying to decide, that you have got to decide. People are looking at you to decide, all right, the answer to this is yes or the answer is no. And it's not necessarily to you a burning conflict of, boy, I really want to say yes, but then again I really want to say no. You can apparently be rather indifferent, and yet you've got to decide. Or else you do have some feeling, but the feeling of yes and the feeling of no seem to be equally balanced. Remember, this is not right, but this is the closest I'm going to point. It's as though you pick out another situation that's going on, in which you're involved, in which you're exposed of another contingency, and you decide. Remember, this is not it. I'm going to warn you. But you decide, all right, if such and such over here happens, then I'll say yes, and if this doesn't happen, I'll say no. That's not it. But I didn't go through all this to waste my time and say that's not it, and just try and present you with some kind of pseudo Disneyland Zen piece of used garbage. There's a reason I'm doing this. I just want you to know it's not as simple as it sounds. And it's not exactly like I'm saying. It's not simply that you can't decide to tell someone yes or no, and then you decide, all right, if the Dow Jones goes up 50 points tomorrow, I'll tell them yes, and if it doesn't go up, I'll tell them no. No. That's not it. That is not it. But I told you something. You, in a sense, are trying to force E into a present, into a current, into an active playing position in the quote problem, in the quote situation. There is another aspect involved that I sure as hell am not going into based upon the stage of the moon tonight, and that is that if you know how to use this, if you find some way to use it, it also keeps all foes off balance. Because nobody can predict what you're going to do. And that's the kid here, whether we're talking about out here whether people can predict, or whether we're talking about in the great land of plenty, in some other state. That your foes cannot tell, they cannot predict, there is no logic, there is no systematic way in which they can try and formulate a game plan. That oftentimes what you may seem to be doing, it's worse than irrational. It makes irrational look pretty straightforward. There is no pattern to it. That's not the reason to do it. That's not the purpose now. I'm just pointing out another aspect of it. You might look at it as being a side benefit, if you need any benefits on your side. Uh, 5 minutes, eh? Next paragraph. The people, the hoi polloi, always see their individual problems, difficulties, their actual personal conflicts, that all such situations always bringing them up to this self-same edge wherein seems to linger forever. Always appear this question. Whatever seems to be the difficulty, whatever seems to be the problem, the kind of irritation, the kind of conflict going on. Very often, what seems to be a personal level between them and somebody else, between them and other groups of people. You just never thought about it this way, but it always seems to be coming up to this edge, up to an abyss, and always hanging there on the edge seems to be this question. And the question itself is as apparently threatening as what seems to be the problem. And the question is this: that consciousness sees, feels the problem, the conflict, the impending danger. But as bad, if not worse, then is the feeling that's bringing up to the edge, and then is this question. And the question is always this: what happens now? Well, based upon that reaction, I will assume that some of you actually heard the direction in which I was pointing. But to be sure, let me try and say one or two more words. Not just, well, what if this fearful, apparently impending tragedy occurs, this difficulty does come to pass. Not just that, not just this happens, which is bad enough, but afterwards is then the question, what happens now? And there's a simple answer. Life happens now, kid. Consciousness at the ordinary level cannot see that, cannot hear that, could not remember that. In that strange, perverse way that I sometimes, as I did tonight, try to make you see that which is the most insane is the most reasonable here, and vice versa. To my response to what happens now is life. It is totally unsatisfying. Answer is nothing. It's flip, cynical, it's not downright dumb, and it is not. Because the feeling, now I'm putting it in words so it seems to be at least thought involved. The yellow circuits obviously are entangled in it. And the kinds of pictures that someone has, like, well, what if the worst scenario does occur? Or in fact has occurred. It occurred 5 minutes ago or this morning. And then you sit around, you pace the floor, whatever it is you do. And the thing is, it's not just this situation, which now may be a fait accompli, but it's then beyond that. Tomorrow, next week, next month. After this terrible thing has occurred to me, which is, the only terrible thing, everybody else, forget it. But it happened to me, and now the question is, almost as fearful, almost as death-defying, what happens now? Ordinary consciousness cannot take as the answer. What happens now, kid, is life. What brought you up to this place? Starts with an L. What's going on right now that makes you fear this ever-impending question of what seems to be a reoccurring abyss? The things go along, and then it's just one little tragedy after another, and it's always like a huge thing, and I'm going to fall off the edge of my world. Something terrible is going to happen. I can't recover. What happens now? The same thing that happened not now. The same thing that happened pre-now. The same things that happen, if there was such a thing, as concurrently now. Life happens now, kid. But Mr. Green Jeans, that's no answer at all. That too, kid. Life keeps happening. Next paragraph of ends and odds. Among all people, among all peoples, persons, men's and women's, The real revolutionist knows that the basic molecular structure of all human affairs can be verbally expressed as lead or be led. That is not a social condition. That is not a cultural outcome. That is not a psychological result of some psychological factors. It is the molecular structure of human affairs. Of course, we are still speaking in the 3D world. It can be verbally expressed as lead or be led. Then the real revolutionist, if he was going to try and expand this for some purpose, he might have to point out to would-be recruits the possibility that this might have some personal, internal, chemical use. The possibility, he might say to the recruits, that we're not talking about I lead, you follow. We may not be talking about, even back in the city, of the ruling powers saying, we lead, you follow. That it may have some specific personal use, assuming that you are a person who has a molecular structure. If you're not, consider yourself exempt from this. I might also note for you the possibility that indeed the structures, the molecular structure of human affairs being correctly, properly verbalized as lead or be led. What if we took that beyond this veil of molecular tears and sorrows, as the Baptists used to say? Could you see that men's ideas of a perfected afterlife, of a completed homeland, nay, if I may, paradise, could be described as being where this question, this matter of lead or be led, would be the place where this matter is totally unambiguous and forever settled. Would that not be paradise? This matter of lead or be led would be the place where this matter is totally unambiguous and forever settled. Would that not be paradise? Think about it for a second. Yeah? Yeah? Can you see it, kid? Yes? Because at paradise, it'd just be me and all the other peons and Allah himself, the head gods. There is no question, none whatsoever, of lead or be led. In fact, according to one Vedi Mikam of one religion, at one time everything was paradise, and one of the paradisers, for however it happened, seemed to all of a sudden had some question as to, I might be to be a leader. Maybe I shouldn't just be part of the led. And they say that that mighty angel paid a hell of a price. There's that great philosopher, Professor Alex Bradford, said they kicked him out of heaven. But at any rate, could you see that that fits? That is a right angle, a surprising, a fresh description of what men have always imagined, if we take it in an apparently religious sense, of what they imagine paradise to be, that is one description. That the matter of lead or be led is absolutely settled. No room for question, no room for doubt. If you try and refine it a bit this side of a future now, you can see ordinary people seeking out the kinds of institutions in the city. They faithfully placing themselves under the great feathery arms of the ruling powers of all the institutions, in areas wherein there seems to be very little ambiguity. All religions. I must point out to you, without me naming them, I'll give you a second for you to peruse the religions and your knowledge of same in your little minds. What religion is world famous? What religion has more than one or two followers? Wherein the religion teaches that all things are relative. Religions that teach you may be a leader, you may be a follower, who knows? There are religions that say God may love us and he may not even pay any attention. There are religions that say, hey, we got a God some days, and then some days I don't think we have a God. Now, as witnessed by your hearty and intelligent laughter, you know that for a religion, and I can carry it further, I can carry it into other areas, so you should be able to, for it to have any cogency to it, it has to be unambiguous. The institutions of man, even beyond the religions, the worlds of the military, the commerce, fields of commerce, the worlds of academia, etc., is the stability based upon because, based upon right and wrong, true or false, that there are areas somewhere within an ivory tower, within a temple, within a bank, within a Federal Reserve structure. In this area of human interest and human activity, there are absolutes. There are areas wherein there is no ambiguity. Back to where this paragraph started, however, I know that I have mentioned this area many times, especially in the last year or so, about domination and submission and how it is a natural chemical condition, the lead or be led. I remind you one more time, as long as you continue to react to it, which almost all of you cannot help yourself, you do on the basis that it is a psychological comment. Maybe on a weekday you can take it as being some kind of spiritual observation. It is a CFR. It is a chemical fucking reality. And it has no significance to real revolutionaries beyond the significance that anything has, as to worry about whether you are, quote, being manipulated by the world-dominated communist press, or whatever false role it is, or the international banking combine has arranged themselves to keep us, the little guy and gal, crushed. Every time we save a little money, what do? They arrange a worldwide depression. Give me a break, Kate. Forget all that, even if that's true. Even if that's true. If you're going to look after yourself, which should be number one job, is look after number one person. And something's wrong with you if you don't understand the number one person is me. Not your mother or your father or your sister or your brother or husband or wife. The person to look out for, big old number one. You have got to consider the idea of lead or be led that is not out here. Even if there were conspiracies out here, even if you were part of the led out here, you've got to see that almost everybody out there is part of the led. There's nothing you can do about it if it were true. I'm not telling you it's true. I'm not telling you that's a valid picture. I am admitting, of course, that many people are wired up to believe that it is true and it is of consequence. But if you're going to do anything about that which is profitable, that is, looking out for uno numero, you have got to operate on the basis that this has some useful value internally of lead or be led. I refer you back to our erstwhile descriptions of the partnership. My former suggestions to you that regardless of the erroneous connotations of the ordinary mind about man being a battlefield between good and evil, that in a sense you are a battlefield, not spiritual, it's not good or evil, you are a battlefield on a binary basis, in that there apparently, for you to even be involved in any attempt to change, there has to be the apparent reality of a struggle between at least two forces, whatever you cared to call them. On that basis is where I suggest you begin to stick in your big old nose into the question of you're either led or you're a leader. Why else have I conjured up this new picture? I shouldn't say that I conjured up. It's just there, isn't it? Of the revolutionists hanging around the verges of the city. And then in the city, everything else going about its normal, sane business as they should. And these revolutionists and would-be revolutionists and recruits and would-be recruits out there flogging around, if not petty flogging around, out in the bushes and the wet and the cold, and nobody's actually sure what's going on or why they're there or when the payoff is coming. And looking back over the bushes in the city and wondering, are things as bad as I thought they were? Are things as bad as he keeps saying they are at times? Am I getting caught up into some other kind of imaginary reality? Maybe I should go back. Well, maybe you should. Yeah. Who am I to say? How about yet some more revolutionary reports? See if you can follow this back to the revolutionary scenario. From a certain expanded view, all wars, all conflicts, even the apparent threat of wars, the fear of conflicts, could be seen as a kind of violent reaction to change. Even the fear of change, even the threat of change. On the part of the other side. Did the sentence get too complex? Do I ever question the obvious? If we were indeed talking about, as it appears to be, two opposing forces, two potential adversaries, if not overtly engaged in combat already, I'm pointing out to you that from one certain view, quite valid view, all wars, all conflicts, even the threat of war and conflict can be seen as one side violently reacting to change, or even the threat, the appearance of change on the other side. Think about it. I mean, it should take you all of what? 2 or 3 hairs past a freckle, and that's it. What causes wars? You can describe it in several ways, maybe many ways, but I'm telling you one of them is one side. Neighbors, separate princedoms, kingdoms. As one side looks at the other side, if they're not overt adversaries now, there's always the potential. You got to always look at everybody else as your potential foe. One kingdom looks at the other, and all wars, all conflicts, all threats of wars and conflicts can be seen as one side beginning to violently react to change on the other side. Even the appearance of change, the threat of change. Of course, if we were actually talking about kingdoms and governments, it'd be such things as, all right, over here, things have been pretty quiet, but now they're suddenly moving 20% of their missile sites 10 miles to the north. I mean, nobody any closer to us, but any change is threatening. Well, how about this? The government over here used to spend on their station, on their version of WDNA, over there they used to spend, we've measured it, we got statistics that shows they spent 32% of their broadcast time attacking us. And now it's dropped to 0. Huh? Huh? And of course you at first could say, well, hey, they're no longer mad at you. Ha ha ha. Yeah. Any change is threatening on the part of the opposition, on the part of the other side, even if you don't call them the opposition. How about your own partnership? Why is it so hard for people to change? I know you think I've run this in the ground, perhaps, or explained it away in so many directions that there's no possibility you would ever believe that ordinary people can change. It's not necessarily so. Why is it that it seems so hard to change? Well, I think I'll stop exercising a certain habit. Oh, yeah, but I seem to be weak. The habit is too strong. I seem to be addicted to it. I can't seem to remember. Whatever you want to describe it. How about another way? It is you and somebody else. Two forces inside, two possibilities, two directions from which one primal wind may flow. But to you it seems as though there's me and then there's this other part of me in there. There's the me that wants to stop this habit and there's the me that wants to continue this habit. Any description will do. Any. But can you see that you could use the same information, the same view? It's why it is so hard, to change, to even attempt to change. If there just gets to be the threat of one side changing their position, altering their position, even if it apparently on the surface seems to be for your benefit, such as, well, hey, they moved the missile sites further away. Well, hey, they quit attacking me in their daily programming. They absolutely stopped just like that. But all change on the other side is threatening. All change. Can you see any possible use for that kind of information as to the somewhat difficult area in changing one's behavior? That one part of you is even threatening to change, thinking about changing. Well, I think starting tomorrow I may stop doing so-and-so. Or I may start doing so-and-so. Just threaten to. Or I may go buy a book on this, about how to stop so-and-so, or a book on how to take up this new regimen that would... And it's just a threat, and what happens? Well, I think tomorrow I'm going to get up and I'm going to start running. I'm going to get up before I go to work, and every morning, rain, shine, cold weather, I'm going to run. And immediately, assuming you hadn't been doing anything like that, immediately what happens? This is as though the weight of the universe, well, the weight of all reason and logic, leaps into your throat and your brain like, hey, you can't do that, you could hurt yourself, you're out of shape, and etc. So then you can say, well, wait a minute, I'll go get a book. Or nowadays, I'll go rent a VC, what you call them, a video on running. And then you can't find time to go buy one. You can't find time to go rent one. It is a kind of violent reaction. I'm saying you that you can see the basis of all conflict, even war itself, is being one side, whatever one side may be. Violently reacting to change, nay, even the appearance, nay, nay, even the threat, nay, 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 even the discussion of change over there, across your boundary, across the border, and it can produce violent reaction. Did you say can? All right. It do produce violent reaction. I don't guess there's, now that I think about it, I don't guess there's any practical significance to this paragraph, so we'll just go on. If I was going to something really different, talking about odds and ends, I've got one I've never found a place to seem to be a logical segue from anything. So here's the night to bring this out. It would be a subject heading, it's going to be short, but it would be known as molecular provincialism. And by God, there's no doubt this may be to a few of you, probably a scant few, may find this vaguely interesting. As far as it being useful, forget it. I mean, it's obviously. But since I thought about it, why waste it? So, it'll kill a few minutes we got here on the tape. It's molecular provincialism, or cellular jingoism. Provincialism being an abiding deep love of one's own province. Jingoism, I guess I'm pushing it, if I remember, is like a fanatical, hostile foreign policy. Can I parallel things up or not? Okay. I was complimenting myself and then saying, no. I always like to see me humble. There is, what I mean by this molecular provincialism, there is this thing that I could point out to you is one of the strongest impulses in man that I am terming for you, and it's the best term you'll ever hear, that you have ever heard, because nobody else really ever described it, of a molecular provincialism. And it's thusly that there's not even a matter of physical territory in question, such as land, but nothing material, nothing physical. And yet you have groups. That's right, kid, groups. And there are groups everywhere. You remember that? There are groups out there, and there are groups over there, and there are even groups other places than out there. But what I intend to point towards by my description of molecular provincialism is that even when nothing material seems to be involved, that these groups everywhere are always driven to sketch up a logo, stitch up a flag, to proclaim even their non-physical position, presence, and allegiance. And by non-physical, I guess what the people might refer to as spiritual matters, intellectual matters, political matters. But you let any group get together, any group, and if they meet more than once or twice, you watch it. Now, I don't care whether you think you're out there in a group or whether you are twisted enough to in some way find that this might have some kind of, I don't know, or some kind of inner, significance, something like that. That if groups get together for almost any length of time, once or twice, not only will matters such as who's in charge, who's the leader, and who's being led, when's the next time we're going to meet, who's going to bring the refreshments, one of the first things that's going to happen is the desire to come up with a logo. I mean really, in the full sense of logo being the original from the Greek, meaning word. Not just a name, but you want a logo, you want a symbol, you want a banner to run up, you want a standard to raise amongst all the other people, amongst the neighborhoods of the city, proclaiming your position, your presence here, your individuality, your allegiance. It is as strong as anything. Any of the impulses, beyond if we just say the desire, life's desire for the continuation of its own molecular structure through the individual, that is, the desire for you to keep living. But beyond that, when it seems to be anything that is cultural, spiritual, political, economic, intellectual, those sorts of interests in man, just beyond keeping yourself physically alive, there is a kind of molecular provincialism that comes out immediately. Just as soon as you join up, as soon as you go and investigate some group of people, the first thing you look around for is if they got some kind of sign, some kind of logo, some kind of signal. Is there a button I can wear? Is there a pen I can get? Is there a tattoo I can have? Is there a bumper sticker? And it's not just a name. I'm inferring something else now. It's not just to say, well, yes, I am now a Mason. I am now Muslim. It is more than that. It gets down molecular. I could say wolves howl, hyenas pee, men drive stakes and wave banners. Well, I warned you beforehand at least that this had no relationship to any kind of usable reality, so you can't say that you are not for cavited. Question. Can all great thoughts be turned into great deeds? We all know great thoughts. The damn world's full of them. History books are just in the way of almost anything you want to read. It's just everywhere you look, it's some kind of fucking great thought throughout time and history. But no one has ever queried the matter in a way that I have just presented. I am asking you literally, physically, materially, and every other way, can all great thoughts be turned into great deeds? If you're just operating on a good, solid, three-dimensional engine, would you not, from one view, immediately want to say and believe that, all right, if a human can have a great thought, if a person can have a thought, which of course implies they can put it in words, that this would be the way life should be, or here is the way a human should operate under certain conditions, or this is the way a perfected, a better, a more humane, a more enlightened human would respond in a particular situation. That is, what is being expressed here, whether I did it or whether I read it from Marcus Aurelius or Dante or Shakespeare or St. Francis, that here is a great idea, there's no doubt. This expression here in this truism, this maxim, this epithet, here is a great thought. And I'm suggesting to you that at first, even at 3D level, you would think that if the human mind, in some way, the human spirit, whatever ordinary people would call it, could conceive of this great idea, even if it seems difficult, even if it has not thus far become an across-the-board reality with humanity, if the human mind and spirit can conceive of this great idea, then it can be turned into a great deed. Perhaps we're not there yet, evolutionary-wise. Perhaps we don't have the spiritual wherewithal, the intellectual gumption, who knows what. But it would seem to be a resounding yes to the question of, can all great thoughts be turned into great deeds? Are you sure? Would it matter if we were asking the question, can all great thoughts be turned into great deeds? Would it matter if we were asking that question on the basis of in the city with the people? Would it make any difference? Or whether we said, all right, let's confine the question out in the bushes with the would-be revolutionists. Would it make any difference? Would it make any difference if we said, all right, the question might have only pertinence if we were talking about in the mind and in the feelings of the ruling powers? Or what if we were just talking about the people, the led? Then would the question have any different possible answer as to whether all great thoughts can be turned into great deeds? Would the apparent locale have any bearing? Next paragraph. Back to something more along the lines that, of course, captures our interest, and that is good old binary affairs. That is, the real revolutionist would recognize two methods of useful movement. Movement being steps taken toward facilitating an attack even. But methods to facilitate some movement in the cause, in your struggle. And one would be action. That is, just doing what you intended to do with no comment. The second way would be, relatively speaking to the first, would be in thinking of action. That is, you announce your intentions and then simply let the words operate. Now, if we had any real ginger ears out there, they might believe that that flies in the face of me continuing to insist that a real person, some of the few, a real revolutionist, a real recruit, any astute person has got to find out that you do not tell yourself what you're doing. And that I'm pointing out to you that there is a way in which you could look at possible methods of moving, ways of operating in life in any given situation as two possibilities. The acting being you do what you intended to do with no comment, which to these ginger ears that I imagined for you, they might believe, well, that's the kind of shit you've been talking about. But I'm telling you that there is another method for those that know how to do it. To announce your intentions. That's it. Just announce them and then let the words operate. If that did sound confusing at all to any of you, let me up the stakes and I can tell you that there's even what I could call an inner core secret to that. Which may sound even more opposed, more in opposition to some of what you may think I've expressed as not telling yourself what you're doing. This is tricky, but tonight's been smoke and whistles and noises enough to most of your perception, so it probably is not going to hurt anybody. And this is a kind of method, I guess, that I should describe in more detail, but I'm not. It'd be the kind of method that you personally, verbally, this would fall somewhere within inner corridors of the second possibility I pointed out, that you could personally and perhaps verbally, overtly verbally, discuss and question yourself as to what you are doing, what you have, how you have been reacting to things that have happened. Which, as I said, some of you should have ears that would hear that as being an absolute opposition, just absolute, to not telling yourself what you're doing. And worse than that, I know that many, the majority of you have believed that that, off and on at least, is a powerful little weapon. And this may sound as though it is an absolute opposition to that. But I can also point out that willful opposition, or that which is willfully opposite, is not really opposite. It's only that which is mechanically opposite is opposite to anything. But it is a method that you can, some of you might find, to actually discuss with yourself, to even question yourself is, well, when so-and-so happened, you didn't really expect that you were going to do so-and-so, did you? I should say I did not. And it's surprising that once you didn't do that, such and such happened. Weren't you surprised? You damn right I was surprised. It's almost weird, isn't it? I'd say weird about covers it or explain some of it. I'm just making this kind of stuff up. We're not talking about, or I'm not talking about some kind of mechanical rambling. I said it would have to be a willful use of a method You could even, if you knew how to carry this far enough in a particular way, you could come to verbal conclusions whilst discussing and questioning yourself and what you've done in relationship to what's happened to you. Except all your conclusions, all of this should always be followed by a kind of all right, I'll have to make up something new. How about a comma-induced prayer type insertion that all along the way, if you do come to any kind of verbal conclusion, talk to yourself, it should be followed. I don't know what the term they use this, but I assume most of you know that in Islam, a real Orthodox Muslim, anytime he mentions Muhammad, or anytime he even writes a word, but anytime he mentions it, you say Muhammad, comma, may peace be with him. Always. I didn't actually, I'm not trying to infer this as a version, but I did just think so that you'll see that it has some mechanical reflection in life. But anytime you were using this method, if you were finding how to do it, you were to come to the point that there would be a kind of comma, what do I call it, prayerful insertion, that if you came to a verbal conclusion in this tricky method with yourself, at the end, right toward the end, you should say, whenever you came to this conclusion about, well, then I guess that you got so-and-so from this, right? But now you see that such and such didn't necessarily happen, or you expected such and such to occur, and when you did this unexpected, it didn't occur, comma, and you should say to yourself, if you're talking out loud, throw this in out loud always, is thank you, laugh. Always. All right. I'll close up our public tape. When I'll give you another piece, how about a new revolutionary rule? Even though I'm tagging this at the end and not going to have any time, even if I had the inclination to discuss it any further, does not mean that it has no great pertinence. The revolutionary rule 10.587 is always smile just before speaking. Always. Always. Don't give me any kind of conditions or yourself about, well, that certainly wouldn't be appropriate if I was about to deliver the eulogy. Or if I were about to volunteer for frogman duty and I only had half my clarinet. Always smile just before speaking. And anybody that wants even more occult levels of that was always smile just before thinking. Well, always smile just before everything. I guess we should stick with the possible, and let me tell you that the real rule, 10.587, should be always smile just before speaking. Final, since this has no connection to anything, it's a good time to throw it in. In regards to what seems to be one's personal difficulties, one's personal problems, one's position in the great scheme of things, in this regard, a knowledgeable person, a knowledgeable man or woman, could attempt to either think their way out of it or feel their way out of it. And one of these is always more immediate and efficient.
And Kyroots said, "Never would I have believed it. Never, never, never. I'll just bet you can guess what this is leading up to. Either that, or you'll never guess." "Oh, okay, you're right. It's just yet more unidentified flying nevers."
Never tell the anxious parents of a 14-year-old girl you're trying to date that you're a front-end loader.
Never feel totally exonerated and free until the judge and jury themselves are hanged.
Never lower yourself to write a sarcastic letter to someone just because they're illiterate.
Never discuss sensitive documents with a man wearing kilts.
Never just automatically expect to get paid if you expect to get laid.
Never, even theoretically, discuss the question of what might be the unkindest cut of all with a disbarred rabbi.
Never admit to a solitary vice, except to yourself, and even then.
Never tell an out-of-sorts Green Beret how well his eyes complement his ensemble.
Never appear boring, even if you are.
Never invite the drunken crew of a Syrian tanker home to meet the wife.
Never try and get a pickup game of volleyball going amongst the opening night audience during the first intermission of Götterdämmerung.
Never adopt a funny, cute stage name if you already have a funny, cute, real one.
Never believe that any bark anywhere is worse than a good bite.
Never, no matter how good has been your luck up until now, doubt that if you don't put your eye out, you will break your back, because you will.
Never wear a name tag identifying you as Captain Precious Courageous at an American Legion convention.
Never whisper to the Pope while bowing that he has doo-doo on his little slippers.
Never, as you get older, refer to your wife as mother. Unless, of course, she is. And even then, I don't want to hear about it.
Never eat and run unless you're having ballistic Newtons.
Never hesitate to ask any eating establishment that advertises the amount of stuff they've sold for the name of at least one former customer.
Never have your picture taken alone. In case of a passport, go as a group.
Never ask anything specific of a God unless it's perfectly clear what future obligations may be involved.
Never ask a sitting judge if you can adopt a Girl Scout troop just for the weekend.
Never offer to go one-on-one with a busload of amphetamine-crazed Iranian football players.